there's Carrie just is on. Can we unmute Carrie? Cool.
Yeah, that was my card. This is Carrie. This is one that we are always struggling with. We being IT, we completely buy into Agile. We see tons of benefits. We haven't got our business partners totally convinced, and they continually come back with, we want traditional scoping and estimating. We want to know, or, we want it done by this date. We're just struggling with how to take advantage of the Agile benefits when feels like we're kind of straddling both worlds and being pulled back.
Cool. So Carrie, why do your business partners want clarity on scope and dates?
Because that's what they're used to.
Is it because they have to set expectations with their customers and align programs and marketing, and like sometimes that's a reasonable place for the business to be coming from? Right?
Partially, yeah. I think we are an old organization, so our roots are traditional catalog mailer, long lead times, planning, all of that. And while I think everybody recognizes the need and knows we have to continue to evolve and change, everybody's comfortable and used to how they've done it for 40 years.
Right. So I'm gonna give you two different answers, but what I want to do is start with, there are times, I don't know if it's all the time or how often it is, but there are times when it's reasonable for the business to say, I want to spend this much money and solve this problem by this date.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reasonable request from them. And so what we do is, how do we operate in that situation? And how can we use Agile to maximize our opportunities for success in that model? And the story that I would have with those business partners is, listen, here's the thing. There are a lot of uncertainties in the plan here. Let's kind of be able to deliver frequently and get your feedback throughout. Let's test so we're not bottlenecked at the end. And I would tell them, in a lot of our traditional projects, I actually have a story that I tell about this. In a lot of our traditional projects, we get to the end, having to make a lot of trade-offs under pressure because the scope was kind of unknowable and the amount of effort was kind of unknowable. We didn't have perfect answers to things. So we get to the end and we don't get the testing in. We have lots of defects, with all these problems. So what I'd like to do is, I understand that you need to understand how much it's going to cost and what problem you're going to solve and when we're going to deliver. The trade-off I need from you is, I need you to participate early to help me drive down the risk. So when we're having those trade-off conversations, we're having them informed and we're having them not in the last minute. So I'm going to give you a better way to operate with my organization, the way you always have. They'll start to see the benefit in early delivery and frequent feedback. Does that kind of make sense? There's a class of that where that is the right answer.
That does make sense. I think that's one of the things that we've slid backwards on since going home and not, being face-to-face together. We struggle to have those early collaborative conversations. And yeah, that would definitely make a difference.
Yeah, so I have to have my work risk-based and value-based and prioritized, and be using my Agile teams to deliver incrementally and iteratively. You can give me your big plan up front and your big scope up front, but I'm not going to go down to every granular detail because it's kind of mythical. I'm going to give you estimating that's at least as accurate as what we did before, using some yesterday's weather or some affinity sizing or some expert judgment, some Delphi sort of mixing together of things to give you the best plan. What I need you to do is help me work on driving down risk and getting the trade-offs early. Because here's the thing. When was the last time you actually delivered a traditionally scoped project and a traditionally estimated project without any trade-offs being made?
Yeah.
It's never happened, right?
Right.
So we're going to let you have what you need, but we're going to collaborate with you and use this Agile delivery to make those trade-offs when it's less expensive and more informative. And here's the options you have. Let's do the most valuable things first. So if we trim the tail at the delivery date, you've got the most important things. Let's, instead of trying to put in everything that might be needed to solve the problem, let's go end to end and put in the minimum amount of stuff that might be needed to solve the problem, drive down all the risk, and then add things to it as we approach the date, but we actually have some capacity to know what we can add. There's a whole different conversation I would have with the business around that. So what happens is, I'm not telling the business that they're wrong. I'm actually going to go do what I would do with my Agile teams anyway. But I'm giving them the power and the control over their scope and their trade-offs of what they had in the past. What they'll do is they'll start to learn from that and go, oh, I could actually put some riskier stuff in. Oh, I'm actually willing to move a little bit faster. We bring them along by building that muscle of thinking in value and risk and demonstrating through frequent delivery that we can give them a better bargain for spending their money on solving problems.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's probably some problems where they go, I have no idea what I want. This is a brand new market space, but I need you to go build something that does this so I can go test it in the market. The conversation there is really very much the same. It's, that's really risky. What's the smallest thing we could possibly do to go drive down the risk and prove that? So it becomes a different sort of game as well, but it's in the same vein. Let's go build something really small or something really cheap or find a smaller subset. Let's solve a single problem for a single customer in a market, sort of drive it. There's patterns to, again, give the business what they need to mitigate their risk. And there's some games that you can play in impact mapping and certainty of decisions to lay out and go, well, we want to solve this problem for this customer because we'll get this result. You kind of go, well, are you sure? And their answer is no. So you can start the conversation. What's the smallest thing we can do to validate that? Let's decompose this down to more frequent delivery and interactions with customers or subsets of problems in markets. So look at some of Goijco's impact mapping. We actually have some pretty rich enhancements that we've built on there, but that's an interesting way to collaborate with the business around fixed scope and risk and uncertainty to help them build a plan where they understand where the risk is and how they're going to collaborate with you to move it down, to burn the risk down early and make trade-offs early. But there's like a game that we're playing to give them more control over their scope.
Thanks.
All right, so this card also doesn't have a name on it. So if this is your card, raise your hand. We'd love to hear the context around why you posted this. And the 3 people who voted it up, it'd be cool to hear why you all wanted to hear this discussion as well. So if you want to go ahead and join us, raise your hand in Zoom. Give people just a second here. Come on, whose card is this? Everyone's quiet today, Dennis.
Anybody have a point of view on what we mean by innovation? What we mean by fostering innovation? Lawrence?
There we go.
Lawrence, are you related to a guy named Chris Konopka?
Nope, no relation. So, we are using scaled Agile. And one of the things that we do is break down when we're into the program increment planning, is break down what we plan to spend. And we do this with business in the next increment. So we have categories as how much time we're going to be, spending on new development, how much time we're going to be spending on quote maintenance types of things, how much time we're going to be spending on innovative kind of things. And by innovation, I mean things that are going to improve our process. Let's say you automate a piece of the pipeline. So where you were testing manually, now you have automation put in place and you can execute that. So your process becomes faster and higher quality. So that's some of the things that we do to kind of help that struggle between innovation and constraints. And there's always conversation naturally from the business to say, why are you spending that time on that when I need this? But I think through the conversation, they start to understand that, hey, I'm going to spend some time here, but in the long run, it's actually going to make things faster and it's going to make them a higher quality. And little by little, I think what we've seen is that starts to pay off and they start to understand. They don't always agree with it, but I think they start to see the benefits and question it less.
Yeah, what I'd like to be able to do in those cases And I actually think it's really interesting. If the business isn't valuing innovation, then we're not positioning it correctly with them, because it is a business decision whether to innovate or not. It's a business decision whether we want to be slow and have crappy code or whether we want to move fast. And when we try to protect our innovation time from the evil business people that only want to shove features in, I know I'm using hyperbole to describe that, but it becomes an interesting battle. Why can't I have that time? And so what I've learned to do and have this conversation, throughput is currency. The number of features I can give you in my organization is a value that the business cares about. And so the trade-off conversation is this. It's not sort of thematically, if you let me do this, we'll be a little bit faster, but I need a full sprint this next release. If you give me that full sprint, I can solve these two problems, and we believe you'll get 10% more throughput in the next PI. Is that an investment you'd like to make business? We have a real problem with defects, and what it's doing is it's consuming 30% of our capacity in the beginning of each subsequent PI, because we're busy fixing all the crap that we shipped that was broken, because we don't have the ability to test and maintain it. If you will let us spend a sprint fixing it or some capacity, it's an investment of dollars for a return of time. It's an investment of time for a return of time. So if capacity or throughput becomes your currency, you can have that conversation. They actually are business decisions. And most business people will go, really don't want to spend it, but I understand where we are. And then you can educate them on how the decisions they're making, if they don't spend enough on that, the decisions they're making are actually going to make you have less throughput in the future. What happens is technology organizations get in the habit of order taking, of just being an order desk and feel like they have to deliver everything the business asks for and deal with the consequences of the poor decisions on their own. I think the consequences and the decision of those poor decisions have to be front and center in front of the business, but in the language they care about. This code's really hard, is a technology problem. We're building the code in a way under the time constraints that we've put in place that prevent us, that they're going to make us go slower or increase our defect rates or prevent us from accelerating, is a business decision. So my thought process there is always to turn that type of innovation into a conversation. There's another interesting part of this too, which is what does the business think innovation is? The business probably thinks innovation is creating new ways to consume, to spend money with your company, or new ways to compete in the marketplace. Y'all may be using innovation differently as well. I don't know what conversations you're having, but I would get really, really clear about the types of innovation we want to spend money on. And then there's just a pragmatic reality, man, that there's always more demand. There's always more problems we have to solve, things we're chasing to get paid now than we have capacity to deliver. And so we have to make it really important to the business to invest in improving our ability to give you more throughput in the future, to give you better quality so we don't waste your capacity in the future. Is that helpful at all?
I think one of the other things from our perspective, again, since we're scaled, we have 5 sprints that we deliver business functionality, and we have the IP sprint, innovation and planning, which we reserve for innovation. Now, naturally, it always doesn't work out like that, but that definitely is something that we set aside. Each program increment is a whole sprint worth of some time for planning and some time to actually do innovation, training, all that type of stuff on a regular basis.
Is that the time that the business is trying to take away from you? They want to use that to add more features. They don't understand the value of that?
Not usually. I think they understand that. I think if we were to move some of the innovation into the regular development sprints, it is where they have a little bit more conversation with us. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. The other thing over time that I've seen is the ability to protect that innovation time. We have to be able to demonstrate results from it.
Yep.
So there's like a theory of constraints thinking around our system. What is the thing that if I do will improve throughput? If you can measure it and show it consistently, then that's really pretty important. Can y'all hear me still?
Yep. And I think the other thing that we also do is we maintain maintain an innovation log. So the innovation log, identifies what might help in the process, and identifies what the impact could possibly be. What is it going to save us? How is it going to help us? Is it going to increase the quality, reduce time, that type of stuff, and prioritize those so that the business can see, what are we getting as a result of this?
Yeah, I want to help it not be a local optimization thing. I want you to be able to show the business where the bottlenecks are in the pipeline and how what you're doing is going to improve the value that they get.
Yep.
All right. So we will, thank you, Lawrence, for jumping in and giving some perspective. We're going to jump to the next topic here. So if this is your card, would love it for you to join us, or any of those people who voted on it, or anybody else who has some thoughts. Make sure there's no other cards floating around here. Love to be able to have some conversation about this one. This is a problem I think a lot of our customers run into as well. It's one Dennis and I were talking about as we were preparing for this topic.
Yeah, this is always really interesting. I'd love to know whose card this is and get some feedback on your situation. Be able to ask a couple questions.
No one's brave today.
Or got called into a crisis or something. So one of the things that we've been like, I think the question here, you kind of have the answer here, which is a portfolio Kanban model that accounts for this. And these guardrails are just real. These concerns around compliance and security are real. I mean, you can't have your privacy information stolen because the system didn't protect it right. You can't violate the rules that allow you to get paid and end up with an audit or a tax problem. Those are just real problems. And so what happens, and it's interesting, what happens is when we don't have the system designed to incorporate those discussions in the flow of work as it's coming up, it's a problem. The key challenge that I see around PI planning and PI commitments is that we don't involve the compliance and security planning and conversations into the epics and features we're going to process until we get to PI planning. Like, we need to have a standard way of making sure we have the compliance or security people in the room at the right time having the conversation. We need to be planning that work before we commit to it, because you can't get to the end and get blocked. You also can't start work that isn't appropriate. So the single intake funnel filled with approvals, the problem that you have there is that the approvals are going to 16 different groups with their own work streams, all non-instantly available. That portfolio group that gets together, responsible for doing the staff work, to come together and agree whether we can move stuff through or not, it's critically important. You also eventually want to get to some sort of a class of service, although people will try to take advantage of it, where not everything has to go through the compliance and security funnel. So you need someone that can triage that work and determine what has to go through the big funnel, what doesn't. There's simply no way to avoid making sure that we're not going to end up in compliance and security terms. Now, if we build sufficient automation over time and can prove that we always have zero problems when we get to the end because we planned it early and our system and standards account for it, you can begin to lighten the presence of compliance and security. But if you're going to try to do it with all disparate teams and send these things off to get input and not bring them together, it's a problem. So what we do is we actually take our portfolio Kanban flow from solution design, from strategic alignment solution design, preparing for release or PI planning, and we make the work that's explicitly necessary to be done before we get to PI planning. So you're not showing up trying to solve for these things after the release has been planned. they're involved in planning the release. One of the things that we've seen fail is because we don't take into account the constrained nature of some of our security testing, we can build a whole release, not be able to ship it because we've overloaded our security capacity, and we don't have the automation to support. There's all kinds of reasons why we can't put things through. So what I want to get really good at is that portfolio Kanban. Now, the challenge you're having is struggling to implement a portfolio Kanban model. So the second part of the equation is, how do we demonstrate the cost of the late arrival of information into our planning process and get those other parties with valid concerns to be engaged, because they're not impeding the flow of value delivery. If shipping stuff creates a compliance problem that gets us fired or gets us to fail an audit or gets our information stolen and gets us fined by whoever would fine us for that, right? So what they're doing is we have to get them to participate to maximize the flow. So taking that governance model, that explicit portfolio Kanban flow, and engaging in a conversation about what's necessary, capturing the metrics, even if nobody's participating, capturing the metrics of the cost of blocks and delays and rework from a lack of participation, and show the benefits of appropriately participating. That's kind of the game that has to be played here, because those guardrails aren't there just to piss people off and get in the way. Those are real valid concerns that must be addressed in our organizations today. How we go about it and the burdens that we put on and the inefficiency in process is the problem. It's not the guardrails themselves.
I'm going to go out on a limb and maybe get you to talk a little bit about this, but I know when we talked about this in the past, one of the things that that we do and that we've had some success with is making compliance not like a step in the Kanban, but it's kind of like what you're just saying, but like kind of spreading out their involvement from being just like kind of late at the end or only at the beginning kind of thing, like spreading out their involvement across that Kanban so that the information is arriving as early as it can, because some of it can arrive early, some of it can't arrive to the middle, some of it, arrives a little later, but getting it as early as it can arrive.
The other thing that's important, the reason why compliance and security people don't want to participate is because if they plan early, by the time they get to the end, something different has been delivered or changes have taken place. And rather than participate in the emergence of that understanding, they want to wait till the very end to participate and just validate everything at the end. We actually need them. That's more expensive to the organization and probably to the compliance and security teams themselves than participating in the evolution of understanding as we're going. So you're right. So there's a team with security and compliance engaged in it. And they're in doing strategic alignment. They're in during solution visioning. They're in during release or PI planning. They're in paying attention during execution. And they're there to verify the results and benefits at the end. So they're participating in the process as we're going. We're so used to throwing things over the wall, then sending a bunch of documents to comment on, throwing it over the wall, getting to the end, delivering something that doesn't meet the intent of what was in the document from their perspective, and then having a lot of fireworks and rework and churn at the end, right? So it's about keeping a shared understanding with those groups as the work moves across that Kanban level. So it also is very, very, very expensive to do this in giant batches. So when we try to do the whole release or PI plan the day before PI planning, it's extremely expensive to those groups. So we want to start to continuously flow the grooming of the epics and features. Even if we are releasing them quarterly, we want to be weekly or monthly building up the backlog for the next PI with the involvement of those groups, and then have them involved in the evolution of the work as it's moving through. So it's about evenness of demand. It's about creating collaboration for the interdisciplinary team, which includes representation from architecture, compliance, and security, and working together when it does cause a big block to figure out how to improve our process so that we can get flow. They're as responsible for flow as the development organization.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, so it's like a give and take of making sure that, in a certain way, we're trying to get our stuff to flow through their world faster, but we also have to be aware of their concerns and make a world where they can play easier.
Yeah, if we don't read the documents, get to the end, build everything, they test in the end and it's different than what they expected, or we didn't pay attention, then we're not going to generate trust in those systems. They can't be separate. They have to be part of the flow at the larger chunk at the epic level. And I think the PI is too big of an increment to participate at to do this effectively, because it creates such a burden, such an overburden on those parts of the organization at the beginning that they have to wait till the end to test everything.
Cool. This card's a little vague. Probably needs some. Cool. Wesley's going to join us here. Anybody else who wants to join the conversation would be cool to have you come on as well. Just raise your hand and we'll turn you on.
Can y'all hear me?
We can.
Hey, well, vagueness, sorry about that, but really, you know, one of the things, we're not a software company, we're a healthcare facility with taking care of patients. And, you know, we have multiple teams. We have people that are in KTLO, we got people that are doing upgrade work, we got people that are actually working on projects, and we've got some optimization activities. And those optimization activities are really where we're trying to focus the teams in some components of the Agile framework, right? So, you know, I kind of was tagging on to that first question. As traditional scoping and estimating, you know, we have a, you know, there's another question I was going to ask about just the hybrid, you know, is there such a thing as a hybrid environment? But one of the teams that really are trying to work with we don't use epics, we use enhancements more than anything, just because of the historical nature of that word. But they use a Kanban model. And it's almost like, you know, in a Kanban model, you know, you're understanding, you're trying to maximize work not done and focus on the work that needs to be done and your next highest priority. But it seems like there's just this big chunk of work, and whoever's yelling the loudest gets brought up to the front, versus a Scrum where we're trying to create we use releases and sprints.
Yeah.
Not a PI, but you know, they want a 3-month sprint, and they just kind of create this Kanban, and there's no, if they get new requirements, they just dump it in the backlog. They don't think about layering it out into future releases. We'll do that later. And so, you know, one of the things I'm looking for input on is how to impress the importance of using a Scrum and using a sprint to get what you talked about as flow versus a Kanban, and just getting y'all's feedback on, you know, we do have a pretty good product backlog. We do have very capable teams, but it seems like we're more adjusting priorities, and we only use the Kanban so we can have that flexibility versus really sitting down with the hard work and planning those sprints out, setting those sprint goals, those kind of things. And I guess, does that bring any clarity to that question?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's interesting to me in that one is there are times when Kanban or Kanban is in fact appropriate for teams doing work. So I can see a situation where a significant amount of work that's coming in is in fact going to be escalations. It isn't plannable. I can't lay out a PI and sprints because I can't make a 9-week, or I'm sorry, 3-month sort of commitment, or a 90-day commitment is the number I was going for, because it really is going to be that volatile. A lot of times we see things like bug fixes and enhancements and maybe deployments of servers, or you know, and you see Kanban in use in the emergency room, and the triage and prioritization of patients changes all the time, right? So if it can't be planned, then what we're trying to do with the Kanban or with the Kanban is get people to swarm to make work flow through, to dramatically increase the adaptability of our system. If the reality is my demand pattern is unplannable in 2-week or 90-day chunks, Scrum is not an appropriate model because my batch size, even at 2 weeks, is too big. If that's not your case, does that resonate at all? Why you might not be able to do Scrum,
right,
or release plan?
Absolutely. I think sometimes that's definitely the case. Other times it's just convenient.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and I'm from the South, so I say Kanban instead of Kanban. Sorry.
Yeah, it's funny. There's like people used to argue about it. I don't really care. I'll say both. I say Kanban. I'm also from the South. You know, I grew up in Tucker, Georgia, and I moved away from home. I live in Milton now.
Okay.
So
Well,
it's about,
we're in Atlanta, we're downtown, so you know but regardless it's not. I don't want to create an argument. I want to create innovation. I want to create the ability for the teams to understand what they've got to accomplish, and really focused on that. We do have enhancements that come in. We can handle those maybe in an incident or something outside of the work. I was just wondering if you guys have seen this successful blending of those two, maybe based on a different scope
this
of
out.
work.
Yep. So check this out. In our model, we'll very, very frequently do Scrum because we have a multi-tier model. We've got features flowing through a Kanban. We've got epics flowing through a longer time horizon Kanban because they're not sized exactly. And we're pulling them through and prepping them. We're pulling the features through for the epic above it, but our delivery teams are often operating in sprints. We're using the Kanban at the feature level to focus and move the team in smaller batches. But if we decide, because something comes up that we need to put an emergency enhancement in, or we need to reprioritize features up at the top, we'll pull in at the feature level, but finish the feature that's in flight through the Scrum. What that requires is discipline of getting small batches of work flowing through. So you don't start, we see a failure mode where you might have 10 features the next release, and you've got 4 teams working all 10 features at the same time. So there's no adaptability. But if I have 10 features, I have 4 teams and they're working on 4 features, then I can pull the next feature, and when one gets pulled through, then that's like a model where I can be very disciplined in planning my sprints and prepping and making sure work is ready for my sprints. But I also have adaptability at the 2-week boundary if necessary. And that's something that we've had a lot of success with, sort of balancing that urgency versus a planfulness in an organization. There are reasons why that's hard. And the reasons why it's hard for organizations to pull backlogs is because we don't have the system in place to get the backlog defined clearly and prioritized and ordered. And so we're just making it up real time. That has all kinds of downstream failure modes and consequences. The other reason why you want to plan your release is that often we're changing people's work or policies or how they go about doing things. And we need to be able to update our documentation, our work processes, and our support capability of the product. So that choppiness of work can actually cause a lot of problems downstream. So often it isn't whether you're doing Scrum or Kanban or how predictable you are, you're operating within a system that's unable to get you a well-groomed backlog. It sounds like that might be your sense of what your problem is there a little bit.
Yeah, we're actually taking some steps. We have some enhancements into our demand process, and even going to include some prioritization with qualitative and quantitative data that really is going to give us the ability to do that. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. Yeah, measure it. The person with the best data wins. Show them the cost of the way they're running the system.
Thank you.
All right, Craig. You put your name on this one so we can call you out. Awesome.
Hey, yes, this is a little bit more of a, I guess, rudimentary or maybe on a beginner level question. I heard a lot of very evolved sort of agile questions today, but I work in an organization that is just adopting agile, particularly in the product management and marketing spheres. And so we've been on our sort of agile journey for the last year or so. And we found to be very effective on the squad level in terms of team sentiment, in terms of output. And, you know, it seems to stop the agile sort of buy-in seems to have stopped at sort of the director level. Anything above the director level, they don't operate in any sort of agile methodology at all. So just wondering if you guys have been through this process before, and what sort of metrics, what sort of conversations do we have to have or stimulate at those higher levels and sort of convince them that this works at the squad level and that perhaps they should take a look at implementing some sort of agile methodology at sort of the executive management level as well.
So let me ask a couple of questions. What are they doing that's impeding your delivery squads to be successful? Is their behavior making it hard for you to?
Yeah, there's a lot of injects, which affects team sentiment. Obviously, we're planning out activities in a 2-week sprint. We're planning on like existing OKRs, and they are, giving work to the teams, or the work is coming downhill that is not aligned to what we've set out to do. And then obviously it disrupts a sprint if it's like a fire drill or something like that, as they're working on something else.
So the challenge that you have is that above the delivery team, you've got people that aren't respecting the sprint boundary and everything's a crisis, and you're trying to figure out how to get them to understand why they want to have predictability and stability within the Scrum team.
Yeah, I think there's been lots of talk of Agile and talk of, why this works and why it's important and how other companies are embracing this. And I think that the idea behind it is yeah, we want to be we want to say that we're doing this as well. We want to make sure that for people coming into the company, we say we're Agile, but then in terms of actual practice, in terms of actual for them to, like I said, a lot of fire drills. There's no seems to be any rhyme or reason as to the work that's coming down from that level.
So I would start with really trying to have empathy for what upper management is trying to solve for, because they don't want Agile. They have no interest in whether we're Agile or Flurble or whatever the latest thing is. What are the problems that they're solving for, and why do we want to show them that Agile is the way to accomplish that? We'll talk a lot about, are they looking for predictability, improved cost, improved quality? What matters to them? And then we have to show them how the system that they're responsible for interacting with helps them deliver on those outcomes, and how sometimes what they're doing breaks those outcomes. This concept of injecting work into the middle of a sprint and making it really hard to test and integrate, and then continuing to still keep pushing in all the momentum of all the work beforehand, we end up with crappy software that's hard to maintain over time. There's a cost to that. If you want better software, this system will give you better software. The thing is, it's not about what makes it easier for the team to do Scrum or Agile. It's how do we tie doing Scrum or Agile to the things that are most important to them as business people. And again, are there urgency and defects coming in because we didn't build something that we thought we wanted, so it got in front of a customer and it was the wrong thing, so they're reacting to it? Let's have a conversation about how to improve that by getting more planful with our features and stories before it gets into the sprint. Is it bug fixes and Sev1 things? We can take the costs of the way they're running the system and show them how to develop a better system. But we have to tie it to what matters to them, to what they're striving for, because they're not interested in being Agile. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess in this situation, it'd be more like go-to-market assets and infographics and things like that, rather than software, because we're trying to incorporate this in marketing and product management, things like that. But
yeah. So what's going on is y'all are trying to flow things through your team, and something gets in front of the guy that has to go present something to the customer the next day, and he doesn't like the graphic that he hasn't seen before, hadn't had any feedback on, and so he panics because he's got to go stand in front of a customer and not look like a dumbass the next day. But he didn't get what he wanted. So the problem is, and Tim's very familiar with this because he deals with me all the time. I'm kidding. That was supposed to be funny, Tim. How do we get more insight earlier from that group, and how do we get sort of incremental feedback as one? They have to participate to not be stuck there. So what we do is we say, hey, listen, if you don't want to be stuck in a panic mode or going to show your customer something stupid at the last minute, I need to get in here. One of the things that Tim has done is we have more standardization, and we're only tailoring certain pieces to make it look better. So when I go to Tim and I go, Tim, I need this, this, and this, I can actually get what I want from a graphic standpoint and a storytelling standpoint that I know is correct. and then I can work with his team sort of in real time to color it in around the edges. Because the work I'm doing, man, I can't plan 2 weeks in advance what I'm going to be presenting to solve a problem for an executive at Ford from a conversation he had yesterday. But I'm not going to walk in and look stupid in front of him.
I think there's also something interesting about that example in that we actually have different teams that work different ways. So we've built a team around being able to take those kind of more less planful requests, and they work more in the prioritization Kanban way that like we were talking about a few minutes ago. And then, I've got other teams that are working on stuff that is more planfully driven, that we can know 2 or 3 sprints and they sprint. So
I have Slack and text access to a small part of Tim's team, and I have no access to the rest of the team.
That's interesting. I like that concept, sort of like a emergency squad versus a more planned, year-long squad. So yeah, that's a good idea.
yeah, and with that emergency squad, what's cool is what we have is they have a backlog of important but not urgent things that they can work on in between, so they can pull if Dennis isn't calling them, but they can easily put down if Dennis is calling them. So when they get interrupted, they just put it down. And yeah, that thing takes longer, but it's okay. We knew that was going to be the case. So we mix up and divide up the work based on, kind of how it needs to get done. But we don't have any one particular team trying to fight fires and meet deadlines.
Right.
You're also learning from the things that become crisis. Like all of a sudden we're asking for the same, like we've made up a new thing in front of a client. Then as executives, we've started sharing it. Then everybody wants the same thing. And so Tim has a process, although we missed this call today, was my fault, about how we go, that needs to become a base asset so everybody can draw from it. So we're not having to invent it again and again and again. So there's a process where the emergency group feeds the sort of stable group. And there's some really cool stuff that we're doing to make it super easy for us to consistently present the right things to our customers.
Is it easy then to go from those base assets and then personalize them based on the customer's needs or going into the meeting? Is that the idea behind it?
Yep. Yeah, he's actually got, can I talk about the tool that you have, Tim, or do you want to talk about it?
Anybody can get it. They'll probably love to have us talk about it.
There's a tool called Templify where we have like a standard format. And every time we go into a new engagement, we actually build a PowerPoint and a Word template that has the same attributes as our core template, but then we brand it. So I can walk in and pull the 7 slides that I want and push a button, and I get out a prepared deck that's in that client's template that we've agreed with the client is our format. And I can spend 40 minutes changing some words and marking it up, shoot it over to Harriet, and Harriet will make my changes really, really quickly. And I'm in front of the client with a robust, complete, stylized deck.
And that team's mission, to abstract it out to the meta, right? That team's mission is to kind of do that like step process, which is like, cool, I got to deliver Dennis what he needs. Maybe we do it in a way that incurs some technical debt, but that's okay. Dennis got it this afternoon. But then in between this request and the next request, we're going to see how do we, if this is something that's getting asked for all the time, how do we pull the tech debt out of it and harden it up to where now it becomes a thing we can deploy rapidly? Or maybe it was a one-off thing and we just let it be one-off and move on.
Because there's no way I'm supporting a 2-week sprint planning for something, for a conversation that came up Friday and I'm in front of the board on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Understand. That was helpful. Thank you.
All right. So we have 3 cards and 6 minutes. Nobody's voted on any of these. So dealer's choice here.
Craig, you're still on.
Yeah. Craig, do you want to choose any of these you're more interested in?
No, I don't have any opinion on those.
Dennis, anyone you want up? Gary, let's bring Gary on, see if he has an opinion.
How about the product owner versus product management?
Cool. That's a great and interesting topic. There's also product designers and other roles now that matter. And this is really a question of scale. And Wesley just raised his hand too, so I'd love to get Wesley's 2 cents. Wes, do you have a?
We actually recently created a product catalog, and we only had product owner. And I talked to the team and we added a product manager. And the purpose was the product owner is the IS person. You know, hey, we're responsible for owning those enhancements. We're the product managers in the business. And that's the purpose of, you know, really verifying what enhancements we're going to classify. And this is all kind of in prep for, okay, we need to start having these discussions with the business, which we are, but you need to identify who that primary person is in the business. And I was trying to get y'all's input so I could, you know, because I've got to have some discussions around the larger team. And I know somebody's going, what's the difference? And so I was going to ask y'all, hey, how do I communicate the difference?
Very cool. So my product managers, their craft is in deeply understanding the customer and the markets, making financial prioritization around what we're going to do, coming up with hypothesis about what problems we're going to solve for which customers and which markets to maximize our revenue, understanding where opportunities are and where we ought to be investing. They're outward facing. So it's markets, customers, problems are the domain of the product manager. And they should be exploring and using data and the craft of product management to pick the most important things to work on and deeply understanding our customers. The product owner's job at scale is to decompose those problems into targeted solutions and designs that can be implemented by the team in small batches and orchestrate all the moving pieces. It's really hard at any organization at scale to be really good at both of those. So I like your idea that the product managers in the business, the product owners in IT, but the relationship between them has to be super well defined. Otherwise you end up with a little mini over the wall problem. There's also this interesting alignment between the value propositions, the customer markets problems that the product owner owns, and how you design the organization to take those requests and manage it, and who does the orchestration if there's dependencies of work. So what happens is the product owner's job becomes much more difficult at scale in complex organizations than it is when it's a single small team facing directly to the customer. Does that help, Gary or Wes?
Yeah, that's good. A question. So what is your opinion about the dev manager being the product owner?
So here's my thing, man. You know what? If they have the right skills and they're not trying to just resource manage and push the team around, but they actually know how to build the backlog and know how to build teams and are able to teach the team to work together. I've had some great dev managers that can do that sort of thing. So if somebody's good at it, I don't care if that title is fulfilling that role. What I don't want to do is I don't want to take the product owner and put him in the product, put him in the dev manager's hands and have the dev manager do what he's always done and just be decomposing the work into tasks and micromanaging everybody, because we're not building any scale or learning to move decision rights down or building in the muscle that actually drives the innovation and agility that we get from well-formed, engaged teams that Agile develops. So it's not about the title, it's about how the person goes around it. And if they're focusing on the system or focusing on the work. Was that responsive, Gary?
Yeah, no, that's good. You know, we like lots of traditional companies making the transformation, you know, kind of struggle with what to do with our project managers, our dev managers, and our product managers, product managers, and dev managers. So the dev managers seem to have the right skill set and personality to be good product owners, from what I can tell.
Yeah, as long as they're business focused and options focused, they might be in your organization. It depends kind of the flavor and the culture and not totally technical. And as long as they're empowering their teams to operate and swarm and work together instead of decompose work. The failure mode that we see with some technical managers become product managers, they'll take those 10 features and give it to 10 different developers, and you're working all 10 features for the whole release because they're trying to keep everybody busy. They're focused on resource utilization instead of the flow of work. So we might have to teach them different skills to get the team members working on moving features through to maintain the adaptability if that's important. So that's the only drawback that I see is they become task managers and resource managers as opposed to enabling the flow of value.
Right. Okay, very good.
All right, so I stole the show here in the last 30 seconds. So yeah, I just want to let everybody know who's on the call and who's streaming online and everything else about our event that's coming up in September, we can hear more of this kind of talk about how do we elevate Agile beyond just what the teams do to kind of what the business cares about. A lot of what we talked about today, Dennis is actually speaking to at the conference, as well as Mike Kottmeyer, CEO, and a handful of others. So check it out, elevateagile.com. There is a 40% off code right now that's running. And so you'll get 40% off your ticket. And the cool part is every ticket this year also comes with a ticket to our 10-year anniversary celebration, where we're going to have Zach Brown and Collective Soul play in Atlanta at a small venue to celebrate our 10-year anniversary, which was actually last year, but COVID stole the fun. So it's 10+1 this year, and you're all invited. So if you have any questions or anything, you can reply back to Candace, who's been on the emails, or hit me up or anything like that. But we'd love to see a ton of folks there in September. And with that, we are a minute over time. And so we'll see y'all again next